We celebrate birthdays, cakes and candles.
Yeah.
But nobody ever really talks about that silence right before your very first scream. Why can't any of us remember that moment? The one that kicked everything off. It's a total blank slate, isn't it?
It really is. Well, mainstream science gives us a pretty solid reason, right? Points to the hippocampus, that's the brain bit for long-term memory, and at birth, it's just not fully cooked yet. So, infants can't store stuff like adults. Seems logical.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense biologically. It's definitely a big piece of it.
Yeah.
But the sources you shared for this deep dive, wow, they really push back on that being the whole story. They suggest there's something else going on. Like, what if forgetting isn't just biology happening? What if it's intentional?
Exactly. That's the twist. What if it's not a glitch in the system, but actually part of the system? A kind of policy to make sure you don't look back.
A policy. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Right. So even if the brain's hardware is still booting up, these sources say, consciousness, it's already there, fully present. So today, our mission really is to dig into these pretty provocative ideas, stuff drawn straight from the material you gave us, challenging the usual assumptions.
Absolutely. We're going to things like preverbal trauma, the soul maybe being pulled into the body, consciousness itself, even these weird white room stories. We're basically trying to uncover what, according to these sources, we were maybe never supposed to remember. Let's get into it. Okay, first up, this idea, it's pretty intense, that birth itself is a kind of profound trauma. How do these sources describe that beyond just, the physical squeeze?
Well, they paint it as incredibly abrupt, disorient, even terrifying. I mean, think about it. You go from this perfect, warm, safe, fluid world, the womb, into sudden chaos. Cold air, bright lights, the shock of having to breathe. It's framed as more than just biological. It's like an existential reset button got hit. And that first cry, the sources suggest it wasn't just yay air. It was more like something deep inside you knew what it had just lost. That feeling of, oneness.
Wow, an existential reset. And if it's that profound, these sources say our nervous system logs it all.
Yeah.
Right, even before we have words. Which brings us to this concept of preverbal trauma.
Mm-hmm.
How does that actually show up, according to them?
Exactly. Without the language or the cognitive framework for normal memory, that whole experience gets embedded right into the body, like a blueprint of distress, they call it, or an echo of your first panic. And yeah, mainstream science might say, well, the baby's brain isn't developed enough for memory, but these sources argue the body remembers. And that, they think, might explain things like why some anxieties feel so old you can't place them, or why certain fears just feel nameless, they trace back.
Okay, that's a lot to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, shifting gears a bit, many spiritual traditions in your sources talk about consciousness before conception.
Mm-hmm.
So what if birth isn't just starting life, but maybe being forced into it?
Right. That's another powerful idea they explore, that the soul doesn't just, happily show up. It might be pulled in, maybe even forced into a body it didn't exactly choose, under terms it doesn't consciously remember agreeing to. It's this idea of resistance.
That's resistance.
Yeah, a kind of resistance to entering matter, which, they suggest, could be behind that silent dread or that sort of instinctual recoil you sometimes see in infants, that distress that just can't be soothed. Maybe it's because deep down, that consciousness recalls fighting against a contract it felt pushed in.
Okay, so that veil then, the forgetting, it wasn't put there for our protection like a cushion. These sources argue it was actually for compliance. How does that work? And what's this system they keep mentioning?
Right, that's a key point. They suggest there's this overarching system, could be cosmic, biological, maybe even social conditioning that shapes our reality. And this system, they argue, actively works to keep certain things hidden, especially the memory of being forced or strongly persuaded into this life. It doesn't want you remembering the sheer pressure it took to compress your essence into this limited form. Because if you remembered that, you'd likely question everything, the rules, the limitations, the whole setup.
That is a really radical framing, which leads to the next idea, this shock of instant amnesia. Like a computer rebooting after a crash. Birth isn't just arriving, it's a collapse. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, they describe it as this immediate total wipeout. Everything known before, maybe feelings of connection, love, familiarity, just gone, erased. That mental break, they argue, was so huge, so overwhelming, that the system basically had to perform a hard reset, a clean wipe. The trauma isn't just the physical journey, it's described almost as the soul screaming into silence. So you didn't forget because your baby brain lacked storage space. You forgot because your entire being had to reboot just to survive the transition. Forgetting wasn't a bug, it was the feature. The cost of entry, as they put it.
So cost of entry. Wow. Okay, let's talk about consciousness then. Because these sources really challenge the idea that it just sort of sparks into existence with the brain. They suggest you were aware before your body, and maybe that awareness never truly left.
Exactly. That's a core theme. Awareness isn't born, it's just translated through the body. Yeah. The mind doesn't start in the brain, necessarily. The idea is you were aware before any organs, before a heartbeat. They use this analogy. birth creating you is like saying the movie screen creates the film. No, it just starts projecting it. The original signal, the consciousness you were, didn't vanish. It just maybe fell asleep is one way to put it. And it waits. Maybe in quiet moments or moments of pain or wonder, it nudges you, reminding you that you weren't actually brand new when you arrived.
Okay, so connecting that back, if consciousness precedes birth and there's this system, why would this system want us to forget that previous state? What's the agenda?
That's where it gets really interesting. The theory is if you remembered the state before the warmth, the freedom, maybe immense connection, the deep silence, would you really accept the terms of this world so easily? The noise, the conflict, the disconnection, the daily grind? Probably not.
You'd question everything.
You'd question absolutely everything. So the argument goes, you were taught to forget, not through school lessons, but through chemicals, trauma, and repetition. A reality based on, a certain level of fear, control, distraction. It needs you to forget the alternative. So this system, whether it's biological, spiritual, social, whatever, it kind of thrives on us having this foundational amnesia.
And maybe that explains that feeling.
Yeah.
You know the one, looking at the stars and feeling homesick for a place you've never been. Maybe it's not confusion, the sources say. Maybe it's recognition, flicker of memory. This next one is fascinating too. These consistent stories, people under hypnosis, near-death experiences, even little kids describing this strange, bright, empty space before birth, the white room or tunnels of light. What do your sources make of these recurring images?
Yeah, the consistency is what's striking, isn't it? It's not just random dreams. These accounts are presented as actual stored impressions, memories maybe from a kind of liminal space, a waiting room between lives perhaps, a place where the soul maybe paused, reflected, got prepped for what was coming, could feel peaceful, could feel intense apparently. But the idea is you didn't just imagine it, you were in it or came from it.
And why does it feel so close sometimes, like in dreams?
Well, the suggestion is that time works differently there. It's not linear like our time. So that echo, that feeling, it can bridge across years, decades, and still feel immediate. It lingers.
Okay, mind blown a little bit there.
Yeah.
Now let's talk DNA. The idea here is that it's more than just the instruction manual for building you. It's like a time capsule carrying imprints. And that junk DNA scientists talk about, maybe it's not junk.
Right. Maybe we call it junk just because we haven't figured out how to read what's stored there yet. And if you follow that thought, connecting it to memory, some of these sources propose that things like trauma, deep-seated emotions, maybe even actual memories can be inherited, passed down.
Inherited trauma. How would that manifest?
Well, think about unexplained fears, like a lifelong terror of drowning when you've never had a bad water, or bursting into tears hearing music from a culture totally foreign to you, or just that weird feeling sometimes when you're alone of something ancient stirring inside you. These sources say those aren't just weird quirks, they're residues, glimpses, like encrypted files in your DNA that occasionally may be triggered by stress or stillness or awe, and you feel something profoundly real, but you have no conscious reason why.
Okay, so pulling all this together, the central argument isn't just that we forget birth naturally, it's that the forgetting is imposed, a suppression. And the implication of that, it touches on why we might feel restless or always searching for something.
Precisely. Why impose it? The sources speculate that remembering the full picture, the sheer scale of the love, the light, the freedom you supposedly came from would be too much. It would, quote, break most people before they could even walk. It would make functioning in this reality almost impossible.
So the system, whatever it is, put up a barrier, a veil, to keep us stable, functional here.
That's the hypothesis, hiding away every truth that could destabilize your ability to cope with this existence. Forgetting wasn't a biological side effect, it was policy, a necessary protocol for participating in this world.
And this feels important.
Yeah.
The veil isn't perfect, is it? Cracks appear.
Exactly. In dreams, in moments of deep grief, in that persistent, nagging feeling that something here just isn't quite right.
You weren't meant to remember everything, but maybe you weren't meant to forget completely either.
Right, and that tension, that push and pull between the forgetting and the faint echoes of remembering, maybe that's what keeps us searching, even if we don't know what we're looking for.
Okay, one last point then. What about the people who do seem to remember bits and pieces? Not everyone has total amnesia about, whatever came before or during birth.
Some people carry fragments, vivid images, sounds, strong feelings that just don't seem to fit this life's experiences. Your sources don't dismiss these as just imagination or glitches. They call them soul signals.
Soul signals? Like what? Unexplained nightmares, maybe.
Yeah.
Flashes of images, gut feelings that just defy all logic.
Yeah, exactly that kind of thing. Stuff that the rational mind wants to file away as weird or unexplained. But the perspective in this material is that these aren't errors. They're potent reminders. Not necessarily clear memories of a past life, but echoes of what existed before any life at all, or maybe during that intense transition.
So noticing them isn't a sign something's wrong. It's actually a sign that memory, deep memory, is refusing to stay completely silent.
Precisely. It's memory refusing to die quiet.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot today.
Yeah.
Some really powerful, definitely thought-provoking ideas, all pulled from the material you brought to the table. Birth is trauma, the soul's possible journey, maybe even resistance, and this huge concept of a deliberate system of forgetting.
Yeah, it's a lot to chew on. And look, whether every single idea clicks with you or not, the real value of this deep dive, I think, is just nudging us to reconsider, to look again at those blank spaces before our conscious memory kicks in and wonder about the forces, seen and unseen, that might have shaped us right from the start. It definitely challenges the simple answers.
It really does. And it leaves us with this question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If many of us feel this inherent search, this kind of homesickness for something we can't name, what could that really imply about who we are, where we came from, and the nature of the reality we experience every day? What else might our bodies, our souls be remembering that our conscious minds were encouraged or even forced to suppress?
Definitely something to ponder.
Absolutely. Something to think about until our next deep dive.